Welcome back to Redbird Fantasy Football. I am glad to have you here with another week of fantasy football picks for Week 14 in the NFL. Before we get started, I would love to give a shout out to everyone that has watched, liked, commented, subscribed to the channel. We here at Redbird Fantasy Football look forward to hearing from you in the comments for weeks to come and into the offseason. We are going to get Week 14 started with a battle between the New England Patriots and the Los Angeles Rams. The New England Patriots are coming off a 45-0 stomp over the Los Angeles Chargers, while the Rams are coming off a win last week. This is a game in which I am questioning which run game will prevail. These are two teams that love to run the ball, with the Rams being ranked 8th in the league in rush yards, with the Patriots being ranked 3rd in the league in rush yards. This New England Patriots team is ranked 1st in rush touchdown percentage. One concern that the Patriots will have is that this Rams defense has been formidable against the run, being the 3rd ranked defense against the run. So on the heels of both of these teams' running games, I would propose that both of the teams' receivers are going to be downgraded in terms of expectations. While the Rams have shown that Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp can have extremely great fantasy days, I believe this is a game that's going to be won in the trenches, and whichever team establishes the line of scrimmage is going to win this game. Another reason that all the wide receivers in this game should be considered a downgrade is think about the secondaries for both of these teams. On the Patriots side, we have Stephon Gilmore, we have the McCourty brothers. On the Rams side, we have arguably the best cornerback in the league, Jalen Ramsey, and other young guys that are really stepping up. Some may even consider the Rams the best secondary in the league. So all things considered, I see all wide receivers in this game getting a slight downgrade when it comes to expectations for fantasy points. If you have followed the Rams at all this year, you have known that trying to track this backfield has been a tough task. Now, one guy that has seemed to emerge as the lead back is Cam Akers, the rookie. Last week, he was given a 63% snap count percentage and handled 68% of the rush attempts. If Cam Akers is continuously put in this position, I believe that he can continue to be an RB2 or fringe RB1 going into the end of this year and next year with how good the Rams have established the run throughout the season. One last thing before we move on to the next game, and that is going to be Prangle picks the winner of this game. I'm going to continue to pick the winner of the game just to give you another reason to laugh at me for my terrible takes. So in this game, I have the Los Angeles Rams winning in a close, run-heavy game that will come down to the fourth quarter and a late score to seal the game. Our next game takes place in Jacksonville, where we have the Tennessee Titans coming into town to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars in an AFC showdown. The first player that I would like to highlight in this matchup is James Robinson. You will hear me talk about James Robinson almost every week when we talk about the Jaguars because he has been the absolute star for this team. He has emerged from the depths being an undrafted free agent. He has really shown the power that the waiver wire holds in a fantasy football season. One of the many reasons I love James Robinson is the amount of touches that he gets. A lot of games he is given upwards of 20 to 26 touches, which includes 4 to 5 targets. This is amazing running back one potential usage out of a backfield that has no competition. Robinson is also efficient when he is given the rock. Robinson is also effective when it comes to running the ball. He averages 4.4 yards per carry. Last week alone, he was in the game for 90% of snaps. This kind of usage is something that we will love to see moving forward and for years to come out of James Robinson. The next player that I love in this game is Corey Davis. Now, Corey Davis is not given all the fame that A.J. Brown has received because Corey Davis was drafted years ago. If you remember, Corey Davis was taken with the 5th overall pick. That is an extremely high value pick on a wide receiver. Titans fans may not feel like they've gotten all that value back, but I'm here to plead my case for Corey Davis. Corey Davis has all the upside that A.J. Brown does. He's given the same targets, he runs the same amount of routes, and sometimes he's even eclipsing A.J. Brown on air yard percentage and target share percentage. So what that means is that Corey Davis can have these explosive games just like A.J. Brown can. It just comes down to who gets the targets that day or who is given a better matchup. Look for Corey Davis to have a great game against a lackluster Jaguars defense who is giving up fantasy points left and right, as we saw last week against the Vikings. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the lack of pass rush for both teams and what effect that has on the game. So neither of these teams have proven that they can effectively rush the passer, and what that means is the quarterback is given so much time to sit, be comfortable, go through his reads, and make a nice throw in a clean pocket a majority of the time. Both of these teams rank in the bottom 3 when it comes to getting to the quarterback with a pressure rate of around 25%. Because of that low percentage of pressuring, I expect this game to be high scoring and high flying with quarterbacks and wide receivers scoring points left and right. An added benefit to this is that as teams try to sit back in a zone, this opens up lanes for running backs such as Derrick Henry and James Robinson to hit the holes and gain 10 yards at a time. My pick for this game is the Tennessee Titans take this game with a commanding 2-touchdown victory. Next, we have the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers down in Florida. This game has playoff implications for both teams as Minnesota is trying to claw into a wild card spot, while Tampa Bay is trying to do the same with the Saints running away with the NFC South. So football fans all know that Tom Brady has a wealth of weapons when it comes to his offense. Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronkowski, Cameron Brate, Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette. We all know these things as football fans. But as a fantasy football owner, we need to know who's going to give us the most value. And I'm here to tell you that Mike Evans is the best value that you can find on the Tampa Bay offense. And here's why. All Tampa Bay wide receivers have that star appeal, but if you look beneath the surface, Mike Evans is the wide receiver that is giving you all of the high value opportunities, which are those targets within the 10-yard line and the 5-yard line. In addition to those high value targets, he is still receiving his fair share of targets and air yard percentage comparable to the other two in this offense. If I had to pick a wide receiver to explode in this game, it is going to be Mike Evans for the Buccaneers. Now, on the other side of the ball, we know that Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen have been a great duo this year. In this game, I actually favor Justin Jefferson as opposed to Adam Thielen because Pro Football Focus ranks Justin Jefferson's matchup just a slight bit better than Adam Thielen's. This small matchup difference is the only difference I need because of all the other metrics being so close. They have about the same target share. They have about the same air yards. One level to Adam Thielen's game that Justin Jefferson is yet to develop, Adam Thielen has been gobbling up all of the red zone opportunities for this Vikings team. Look for Justin Jefferson to find more of those opportunities down in the red zone and really boost his fantasy value. While you may think that this looks like a bad matchup for both the wide receivers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been giving up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. So this is a great sign for Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen to potentially have a boom kind of day. Now, where this defense has fallen short, they are also making up for it in the lack of run game given up. I fear that this is a game that Dalvin Cook could struggle because of this Tampa Bay front that has been so effective when it comes to stopping the run. As we've seen in the past, Dalvin Cook is a momentum kind of guy. Once he runs one for 10, he's going to run another, and a touchdown. That's just the kind of runner that he is. Am I telling you to bench Dalvin Cook? Absolutely not. There is no world where you're benching one of the best running backs in fantasy. But temper expectations and beware that this could be a game with a tough matchup that he doesn't produce his all-star numbers. My pick for this game is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as I see their defense being a little too much for Kirk Cousins to handle, and the wealth of weapons of Tom Brady are too much for this Vikings defense that has struggled throughout the year. Our next game has the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Miami Dolphins. Now, on the surface, this game may seem like a slam dunk for the Chiefs. We've grown accustomed to the Dolphins not being very good over the last stretch of years, but that is not the case anymore. This is a strong Dolphins team and could be a very exciting game. Now, we have all grown to love Patrick Mahomes for his MVP level play, his charisma, and his leadership. But my prediction for this game is that Patrick Mahomes is going to throw 2 interceptions to the Miami Dolphins secondary led by Xavier Howard. Xavier Howard has 8 picks. This leads the NFL. This Miami defense team, led by head coach Brian Flores, has really led this team to so many victories this year, and I can see the Dolphins putting up a fight against a Chiefs team that is on autopilot mode. If they aren't careful, they might see Myles Gaskin running all over them. This is a Kansas City defense that in the past has been shown to give up yards on the ground. Currently, they are giving up the 6th most yards to opposing running backs. Myles Gaskin looked healthy last week and looks ready to continue to dominate this backfield in terms of snaps and rush attempts. As the last 3 weeks of his play, he's handled 70, 88%, and 70% of the snaps while taking care of 3/4 of the team's rush attempts. If the Dolphins are going to compete in this game, they need Myles Gaskin to pop off for his first career game in his rookie season. So with all that said, am I going to predict the upset? I am not. I am going to predict that this game is close heading into the 4th, but the Kansas City Chiefs wake up from their autopilot mode and realize that every win is crucial down the stretch. The Kansas City Chiefs will close out the game with a touchdown and field goal advantage for the 10-point win. Our next game is the Denver Broncos taking on the Carolina Panthers. Rejoice, fantasy owners of Christian McCaffrey. He has returned for a Week 14 battle against the Denver Broncos. What we can expect from Christian McCaffrey is his old self. This was a shoulder injury which should not affect his running whatsoever. It'll be interesting to see if his catching is at all impaired. I do not expect to see Christian McCaffrey miss a step and continues to dominate the fantasy football world. On the Denver Broncos side, I am going to continue to monitor Tim Patrick as a formidable wide receiver too. In the absence of Courtland Sutton this year, the Denver Broncos have been looking at who is going to step up as their wide receiver too. They drafted Jerry Jeudy in the 1st round and expected him to be that breakout wide receiver, but we have yet to see that with a rotation of quarterbacks among other injuries. We saw just last week Tim Patrick went for 2 touchdowns against the Chiefs, and the week before he had 5 catches for 119 yards, and earlier this year he had another 100-yard game. Tim Patrick is sneakily jumping into this wide receiver 2-3 range for the Denver Broncos and for fantasy football. My last point for this game is Carolina defense. The week before their bye, they had 2 fumbles returned for touchdowns. Is this a trend that we can continue to see for a Carolina defense that started off the year as one of the worst in the league? If they can keep that going, this Carolina team is going to be a threat for years to come with the offensive weapons that they've gathered and the draft picks being spent early in the draft on defensive pieces. I have the Carolina Panthers winning at home against the Denver Broncos. Our next matchup has the Houston Texans taking on the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears running back David Montgomery is going to look to finish as a top 12 running back this week, going to a dream matchup against the Houston Texans, who continue to absolutely bleed when it comes to stopping the run. The Texans have ranked 31st in the league when it comes to running back fantasy points scored against them. So look for David Montgomery to continue his running back 1 status that he has shown over the last 2 weeks, finishing as running back 6 and running back 1, respectively. This is going to be a great game to watch Deshaun Watson go into a tough defense in an away game. I expect Deshaun Watson to continue to put up points and should never be considered a benching option. Even though he has lost top targets either through trades or suspensions, Deshaun Watson has shown us each and every week that he is an absolute fantasy stud by spreading the ball around and by using his legs for rushing touchdowns. I hope that this Houston Texans team can continue to surround Deshaun with weapons and a solid offensive line. Speaking of Deshaun's weapons, we have Keke Coutee, who had a breakout game last week in the absence of Will Fuller. This is who they drafted him to be. Keke Coutee was supposed to be an up-and-coming wide receiver, and now With suspensions, Kiki Kuti has been thrust into the starting lineup and showed last week what he is capable of doing. The other Texans wide receiver who really caught me off guard last week was Chad Hansen. Chad Hansen is not a rookie. He has been in the league for a few years, and he looked like someone that could develop for the Texans and be a slot receiver with solid hands and be a safety blanket of sorts for Deshaun Watson over the middle of the field. Let's use the wait and see approach for Chad Hansen to see if he is worthy of a fantasy spot moving forward. My prediction for this game is the Houston Texans win in a close game that has both offenses struggling to move the ball early, but will end in a firework display of touchdowns. We have the Arizona Cardinals taking on the New York Giants, fresh off their upset against the Seattle Seahawks. My question coming into this game is, can Kyler Murray be trusted against a New York Giants team whose defense is starting to emerge as a great unit? Ever since Kyler's shoulder injury, he has not been the quarterback one that we are used to seeing every week before. As a Kyler Murray owner myself, I will be starting Justin Herbert over Kyler Murray this week because of Herbert's dream matchup against the Falcons. If you can afford to bench Kyler this week, you could avoid another bust week for Kyler Murray. For the New York Giants, we have Wayne Gallman, who continues to impress as the running back one for this team. He continues to get a lot of snaps and a lot of rushing attempts for this team, who is desperate to fill in the gap of Saquon Barkley. Wayne Gallman has absolutely stepped up and has given his team life on this win streak of theirs. Continue to start Wayne Gallman if you are needing a running back 2 or a strong flex play moving forward. We have Daniel Jones, or Danny Dimes, returning from injury this week, and I'm excited to see him return to a team that has some juices flowing after their win last week. They're going to look to continue that win streak of theirs and see if they can win this NFC South division, which has been so weak this year. But after the last week, we saw the Giants win against the Seahawks and the Washington football team take down the undefeated Steelers. This is going to be a 2-horse race for the rest of the year. And if you ask me, I am placing my bets on the New York Giants to win the NFC East. So does that mean I am picking them to win this game? Yes, it does. I am picking the upset of the New York Giants beating the Arizona Cardinals at home. Our next game has the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott. When Dak Prescott was here, Zeke was a top 5 running back that we all drafted him to beat. He was getting the touches, his offensive line was healthy, he was getting the targets out of the backfield, everything was great. But as soon as we started to see some cracks in the armor in the offensive line and Dak Prescott's injury, Zeke quickly showed that he has not been capable of being a top 20 running back behind this weak offensive line. Going into this week and the rest of the year, I do not believe that Zeke is a top 15 running back that can be relied on. He also has an injury designation with a calf injury this week and a matchup that could present some opportunity. So look for Tony Pollard to step up if Zeke were to miss or be limited. Now for Bengals fans, you are wondering, does Joe Mixon return from IR? I do not think he will. This is a team that has been struggling. There is no reason to bring back your star running back who you just paid to possibly further injure themselves. The Bengals should continue to leave him sat out for the rest of the year, get another high draft pick, and let Gio Bernard handle the backfield touches. This puts Gio Bernard in a running back 2 or 3 consideration if you are desperate for a flex play. I'm excited to see the continued growth of Dalton Schultz. He has stepped up in the tight end position group and has shown that he can get a few targets and catch them every single week. This Bengals team ranks as the 4th worst against guarding the tight end. Look for Dalton Schultz to pick up 5+ touches and have his highest producing fantasy game of the year. I have the Dallas Cowboys winning this game easily against a struggling Cincinnati Bengals team. We have the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Please, for the love of God, please Colts, will you please free Jonathan Taylor? Stop limiting him to 50% of the snaps and only giving him 13 carries with a few targets. Give Jonathan Taylor the workload that a rookie can handle and see how he produces behind a strong offensive line. I truly believe that Jonathan Taylor would be in the running back 2 or fringe running back one conversation if he was given the bell cow usage of someone like Austin Eckler or James Robinson. Can Phillip Rivers make a final playoff push with the Indianapolis Colts? Can Phillip Rivers make a final playoff push? I do not know. He is currently playing with a foot injury that is further hampering his ability to move in the pocket and escape the pass rush. Phillip Rivers was a statue to begin with, but now with a foot injury, I question his ability to make deep ball throws and out routes whenever velocity is needed from the quarterback. Look for the Las Vegas Raiders to utilize Hunter Renfrow this week. Last week, this Indianapolis Colts team was gashed by Kiki Kuti and Chad Hansen, who operates from the slot. Hunter Renfrow has shown that he can be a slot receiver, but has yet to really have a boom game this year. I believe what looks like a bad matchup for the Oakland Raiders could turn into a great day for them if they utilize Hunter Renfrow across the middle and allow Darren Waller to continue his dominance. This is a close game, but I feel like if I had to choose a winner here, I am going to say the Indianapolis Colts will win this game on the tails of Jonathan Taylor getting 20 touches and Phillip Rivers having a few touchdown throws. We have the New York Jets taking on the Seattle Seahawks, and calling all Seahawks. Are you ready for a dream matchup where you can absolutely explode? The Seattle Seahawks should be boiling after their loss to the New York Giants last week. This is a matchup where the New York Jets' strength is pressuring the quarterback. But as we've seen over the past 7 years, Russell Wilson can evade the pass rush and make plays down the field. So look for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett to have huge bounce back games against a weak New York Jets team who is just looking for the 0-16 dream. We saw an explosion game from Jamison Crowder last week. He had 2 touchdowns from the 6-yard line and from the 3-yard line. So the question is Jamison Crowder back? Well, first you need to consider that he was Sam Darnold's favorite target early on in the year. But after having some injuries and Sam Darnold having to sit out, it took them a week to kind of figure each other out again. I also believe that the development of Denzel Mims and the addition of Brashad Perriman is going to cut into all 3 of the receivers' production and potentially limit their ceiling as wide receivers in this offense for the rest of the year. If you are desperate for a start in the flex, Jamison Crowder could be picked up and played in a good matchup against a weak Seattle Seahawks secondary. The Seattle Seahawks should handily take care of the New York Jets at home. Our next matchup has the Green Bay Packers taking on the Detroit Lions in an NFC North matchup. Buckle up, Packers fans. This is going to be a scoring bonanza. Any and every Packers player that you have, whether it be Aaron Rodgers, Tanyan, Jones, Devontae Adams, they can all be started in hopes of a huge boom day. The one concern I do have for Aaron Jones this week is that the Packers have shown when they get off to a big lead, they will put in Jamal Williams to essentially rest Aaron Jones. So we are hoping for the Detroit Lions to put up a fight so that Aaron Jones could potentially have a 3-touchdown game like he did in week 2. So on the other side of the ball, are there any Detroit Lions worth starting? If you are desperate for a start, I'd say yes. Matty Stafford has proven that he can still throw the rock, going for over 300 yards last week. One of his favorite targets continues to be TJ Hawkinson and Marvin Jones. So if you need a start in one of those 2 positions, you can feel confident knowing that they will get the targets needed for a good fantasy production day. I have the Green Bay Packers easily handing the Detroit Lions a fat L and continuing their dominance in the NFC North. We have the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. My first point is to avoid Atlanta running backs as much as you can. There's a 3-headed beast when it comes to the Atlanta running backs, and none of them have proved that they are worthy of starting in the past few weeks. None of them have handled over 50% of the snaps or received more than 10 carries since week 9. If at all, avoid Atlanta running backs against an otherwise good matchup against this Chargers team that has given up the 10th most fantasy points to running backs. I think it is time for us to confess that Austin Eckler is the AFC version of Alvin Kamara. He is essentially a running back 1 with wide receiver 2 upside as well. They get so many targets from their quarterback, whether it be off of dump passes or routes across the field. This is the reason that we draft both of them so high, because of their high ceiling and high floor in a PPR league. All in all, this is a dream matchup for the Chargers to have a bounce back week after suffering a humiliating loss against the Patriots in a 45-0 fashion. This Atlanta Falcons defense has proven that they cannot stop offenses on the other side. They've given up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, the second most points to wide receivers, and the sixth most to tight ends. I have the Los Angeles Chargers winning this game, even though they probably don't want to, because the more they lose, the higher draft pick they get. I see this as a team that's hungry to win and prove that they are worthy of making a push in the AFC West in the future years under a new head coach. In one of the more fantasy irrelevant games, we have the Washington football team taking on the San Francisco 49ers. This is a game that has two good defenses, which hurts our fantasy upside. Someone that is considerable of taking a look at is J.D. McKissic. With Antonio Gibson out with extreme turf toe, J.D. McKissic is going to take on the lead back roles in this backfield along with Peyton Barber. J.D. McKissic has shown what a threat he can be out of the backfield when it comes to catching the ball. Some have even considered him just to be a wide receiver who lines up in the backfield sometimes. But I look for him to take on more of a rushing role with all of Antonio's carries being distributed out. McKissic can be considered a low-end flex play for this first week of fantasy playoffs. On the 49ers side of the ball, I am looking forward to the next few years as we see Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk continue to flourish in this offense. This has traditionally been a run-heavy first with Kyle Shanahan at the helm, but with these weapons, Kyle Shanahan cannot deny that he has the star power to spread out the ball and throw it deep. The question will become, will it be Jimmy Garoppolo, or will they look to another quarterback moving into next year? Either way, I believe that both of these guys could turn into stars, not only for their team, but as well as our fantasy rosters. I have the San Francisco 49ers winning this game over the Washington football team in a battle in the trenches kind of game where the 49ers will look to use their stable of running backs to beat down this strong Washington football front. We have the New Orleans Saints taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. After a few good games, it is time to start asking and evaluating whether Taysom Hill could really be the future of the New Orleans Saints. After paying him this last year, 2 years, $18 million, you have to wonder whether they are getting a discount out of a potentially franchise quarterback. Taysom Hill has continued to show that he is a threat in the red zone with his rushing touchdowns. But last week, I was really impressed with how much he threw the ball and how effectively he threw the ball. Look for this to continue against a Philadelphia Eagles team that has struggled to contain high-end wide receivers. The question that we have had to ask ourselves over the last few years is Zach Ertz versus Dallas Goedert. Both are tight ends that we have grown to love when they are given all of the target share. But as they continue to split, with Zach Ertz getting healthier and healthier from his injuries, I look for Zach Ertz to continue his reign as the top tight end for this Philadelphia Eagles team, with Dallas Goedert being the second fiddle with still some fantasy upside with his huge play potential. Now, I am begging you, please, please, please avoid Eagles running backs. Let alone the fact that they are not giving Miles Sanders all of the touches out of the backfield, they are also facing one of the top run defenses in the league in the New Orleans Saints. Avoid Eagles running backs. I have the New Orleans Saints going 4-0 with Taysom Hill as the quarterback as they continue to try to make a push for the NFC number 1 seed. Our next game is the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Buffalo Bills. As a fantasy owner of any of the Steelers wide receivers, all you can do is start them and pray. This is a great matchup for the Steelers wide receivers, and all you can hope for is that your receiver is the one that's given the looks and catches the ball when thrown to. This Steelers team has been struggling with drops over the last 2 weeks, and I'm wondering if it's because of all the games they played in a quick stretch, or if they were just getting too lackadaisical being 11-0. I would expect 2 out of 3 of the top name receivers to have a boom kind of day against a lesser Buffalo Bills defense. The fourth Steelers running back is James Washington. As we saw last week, he caught a touchdown and has been starting to see the field more, upwards of 50% of the snaps. James Washington last year without Big Ben shown that he has big play potential and is starting to get more looks this year, becoming more of a rotational guy with the other three big names of Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith, and Chase Claypool. I don't think that James Washington is worthy of a start just yet, but he's a name to hold on to and look forward to next year. This is Josh Allen's time to prove it to the NFL world. This is a 10-3 football team that has hopes of making a deep run in the playoffs. I believe that this is the time for Josh Allen to have a great game against a great defense and prove that he is truly matchup proof and can go against the best of anybody. I have the Pittsburgh Steelers going into Buffalo and taking the W almost as a revenge game to losing last week to the Washington football team. Look for James Conner to be incorporated back into this offense and allows them to use more play action passes and get their receivers open deeper down the field. Our last game to discuss for Week 14's Prangle's Picks is the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cleveland Browns in an AFC North showdown. The Baltimore Ravens will come into Cleveland fresh off of their victory against the Dallas Cowboys on Tuesday Night Football, ready for another win against the Cleveland Browns team. But not so fast. This Cleveland Browns offense has shown that they have two elite running backs, and Nick Chubb is one of the best runners in the NFL. According to Pro Football Focus, Nick Chubb ranks second in yards per carry, ranks second in forced missed tackles, first in the rushing grade. Nick Chubb is no slouch, and in the weeks that he's been healthy, he has been in the top 10 running backs and is more than worthy of a top 10 draft pick in next year's fantasy football drafts. The only downside to having Nick Chubb on your team is knowing that Kareem Hunt is splitting 50% of the snaps. Kareem Hunt is no slouch on his own. I believe that if either of these guys were alone in this backfield, they would be having a monstrous year in a Cleveland Browns offense that is focused purely around establishing the run game. Because Kareem Hunt is on the field just as often as Nick Chubb, I believe that he has just as much upside in this run-first offense. Look for Kareem Hunt to be used more in the red zone and get more receptions out of the backfield, as I believe that the Cleveland Browns will be in catch-up mode against the Baltimore Ravens. This week, the Baltimore Ravens are thankful to have their star tight end Mark Andrews return from the COVID list. Mark Andrews has been one of the top 5 tight ends on the year, and fantasy owners will rejoice when they see him back in their lineups this week against a Cleveland Browns defense that has given up the second most fantasy points to tight ends on the year. This is a slam dunk day for Mark Andrews, and I expect him to go for a multi-touchdown game. So all things considered, how do we have this game going? Well, I think that the Cleveland Browns can establish the run against this Baltimore Ravens defense that's given up the third most fantasy points over the last 4 weeks. Because of that, Baker Mayfield will be more confident, he will be calling some play action passes, and will play to his strengths as a limited quarterback.